Tensions flaring between the U.S. and North Korea over Pyongyang's agreement to denuclearize following the Singapore summit. The North calling U.S. pressure to keep sanctions in place on Pyongyang alarming. This as the country fulfills one part of its pledge from the summit, returning 55 sets of possible remains from American service members killed in the Korean War.
Some have called the Korean War the forgotten war. But today, we prove these heroes were never forgotten. They were also husbands, fathers, brothers, and neighbors, long gone but never lost to the memory of their loved ones.
The remains of U.S. Air Force Major Samuel Porter Logan, Jr. were not among the ones returned. Logan was believed to have been taken as a prisoner of war after his B-29 was downed during a bombing mission over North Korea back in 1950. I'm joined now by his son, Mike Logan. Mike, great to see you.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
According to... Sorry, go ahead, sir.
On behalf of all the my family and the Gold Star families and all those POWs and MIA families of North Korea, I thank you for having me on.
Yes, sir. According to the Pentagon, 7,697 American personnel remain unaccounted for from the Korean conflict. One of them is your dad. What has that been like for your family?
Well, it's been rough, mainly because just the cynical nature of the United States government and the United Nations not to release information and not to be diligent in their search for the remains and or what happened to the POW MIAs of North Korea.
What kind of emotions were you going through when 55 sets of possible remains were returned? My guess is you feel a bond with those families.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's great that 55 people have the hope that their remains of their fallen heroes are being returned. I am somewhat concerned about the fact that it may take years to find out who was actually returned when they could turn those remains over to an independent lab and probably learn what happened to them or who it was within a few months. But here again, that's part of the government bureaucracy that's been a problem with the prisoners of war and the MIA of North Korea since 65 years back.
Are you hopeful that during this time of diplomacy with the North Korean regime, you may get some answers soon about your dad?
Yes, soon I don't think, but eventually maybe so. I think every time that President Trump and Mike Pompeo meet with the Chinese or the Soviet Union, Russians, they ought to ask, where is Sam Logan? Because he was known to be captured. He was. They had pictures of him that were taken when he was captured, and those pictures didn't show up in the American press. They showed up in the Soviet Union as propaganda. So they were interested in him, and they probably had him.
It is believed, of course, the North Koreans did not return all American prisoners of war, keeping as many as 800 Americans. How alarming is that for you and other patriotic American families?
Well, it's not alarming because I've lived with it. I've learned more from this book right here, from American Trophies by Mark Sauter and John Zimmerly, than anything that I've read or was received from the United States government. They have really done a great job, and anybody that's interested in what's going on with the POWs MIA in North Korea ought to get their book and read it. It's extremely informative.
Sometimes we all have short attention spans these days, but remind us of the brutality of the North Koreans to American prisoners of war.
Well, it was, the camps they kept them in were horrible, but even the conditions were horrible, and that's never mentioned. And the fact that they marched them for days without food, water, or medical attention, and if they fell by the wayside, they were shot and left. And there was hundreds of those, and then they never kept records of the ones that were buried. So the ones they returned, we don't know if they're American soldiers or South Korean soldiers or who. So I'm a little bit doubtful. And we have previous prisoners of war that have been returned. Their remains have been returned, and they were buried in Hawaii.
Mike Logan, we thank your family and you for your service and sacrifice, and we appreciate your time, sir.